As the Tibetans would call it, motivation, set ourselves in the right direction, state our purpose, really. We'd say state our purpose for being here together is listen to these views. I'm going to be talking, but I'll be listening, I promise also. So we can hear some advice from it. It's all advice. You don't have to take it. We're the boss, not Buddha. So even if it's 1%, you can be 1% Buddhist. I like to say that. Something useful, then you take it and try to put it into practice. What's the advice for? Well, two things. One is to help yourself become a better human being and more happy and more wise. And two, on the basis of that, be of use to others. It's the two wings of the bird, wisdom and compassion. So this is very relevant to our topic. Because in order to have compassion, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, compassion is not enough. In order to practice compassion, you need wisdom. So let's look at that meaning, because it's not how we necessarily think, But then, of course, there's the activism, that word, political activity, isn't it? How to mix it with compassion. Okay, so we just do a little prayer that expresses our motivation to listen to this with the wish to develop qualities so we can be of help to others. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyap suchi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupashok Sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyap suchi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupashok Sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyap suchi Dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangi drupa shok. Okay. So you could really argue that compassion is the point, the bottom line.
You're this Buddha, the Bodhisattva path, Buddha, when you're absolutely expected of ability to others in whatever needs to be done. You say driven by compassion. So what is compassion? I think in psychology they use empathy in one way and compassion in another. The effect with the Buddhist approach is the same, is this connectedness with others. And specifically, compassion is you see suffering and your heart goes out and you wish that you don't have it. That's the their motives, And people who wrote that to me. So this is the key. It's the way we see it in the world. We have to look at it. From the Buddhist perspective, we have very limited compassion. It's about we only have compassion. You've got to be innocent victim to deserve the life. Think of it. Whenever you see me hit somebody and they punch me back, you've got to have compassion for neither of us. We both deserve. So the only reason we have compassion for the little dog, the child, the poor person, the sick person, who seems to be sort of recipient of some unfair action, That's okay. That's something to what about everybody else? The Buddhist perspective of every single being needs to So why would you want to develop any question make things powerful, online, very huge. So let's look at how we get that level of compassion and who is informed in part quite busy. But before we go further, let's look at the business of activism. So typically one for activism, you take a side, always side. For these days, if you don't want to see Trump, okay, passion with people losing their jobs, and unions losing their jobs, people being thrown out of this and that and change. So we have compassion for this particular group. And therefore, usually what happens is the development, the degree of our compassion, equals the degree of our anger, blame. Because that's the velocity of the world. A person suffers because someone does something unfair.
Gave after he became enlightened, after he saw the way reality is as far as he's concerned, and he gave his first teaching. It's called the Four Noble Truths, Four Truths for the Noble Ones, and it's framed in terms of suffering. The first one, there is suffering. The second one, there are causes. The third is you can be free of suffering and its causes. And this is the entire point of Buddha's path. And then the fourth is the methodology. So the key one is the first one, because he says there are three levels of suffering. This is not that easy for us, but we can certainly look at them. The first two at least. Well, the first one is he calls it the suffering of suffering, which is the regular one that we understand. The poor people, the sick people, the people that suffering in war, being harmed by others. That suffering is evident, and we look into our own lives. It's pretty clear. It's when basically it's when the bad things happen. You hurt your knee, your husband leaves you, you lose your job. We call those suffering. Straightforward experience of pain in the body, that's suffering. And we all know we don't want that. And then we look at the world and we know they don't want that either. And that's the only one we identify. Now, the second one, he calls it the suffering of change. The third one's called all pervasive suffering. Forget about that one altogether, okay? It's a very much of a vaster view. We won't even go there. But let's see if we can get our head around the second one, because this is very powerful. So the suffering of change, shockingly, is what we refer to as happiness. So basically, Buddha's view is when the bad things happen, that's what he calls the suffering of suffering. And we agree with that. That's suffering. The second level of suffering, a subtler level, a more nuanced level of suffering, we call happiness. In other words, the first lot is when the bad things happen, and the second lot is when the good things happen. So, of course, when the good things happen, that's what we call happiness. When the bad things happen, that's what we call suffering. Well, he calls the second one a subtler level of suffering. So let's see if we can understand. And it's to do with the mind. Broadly speaking, it's to do with the mind. Specifically to do with attachment. And that means we have to get to understand the view of karma. This is fundamental to Buddhism. Such that everything we think and do and say programs us. Everything we think and do and say now sow seeds in our mind that produces our own future. That's a crucial piece to think about, which we tend not to think about. But the second kind of suffering is related to understanding the mind. And that means we have to understand that we've got positive qualities like love and compassion and kindness and generosity and forgiveness and self-confidence and all of those. We know these states of mind. And for the Buddha, broadly speaking, the prevalence of those in our mind equals feeling happy. They are the source of happiness, actually. Happy feelings. Very simple. If you're loving, if you have a lot of love in your heart, you're feeling affection, your heart feels happy. You know, if you're generous, your heart feels happy. We understand that. It's speaking very simply. So if we can understand that in our own life, simple way of talking, that the positive states of mind are the source of my own happiness, not to mention that when I act upon them, then that sows the seeds in my mind that produce my future happiness. So now let's look at the other states of mind, because this is the key to understand. And they're the unhappy ones, the neurotic ones. As far as the modern psychological views and neuroscientific views of a person are concerned, this is a normal person, has some love, some compassion, some intelligence, some depression, some anger, some anxiety. That's a normal person. Well, for the Buddha, he is suggesting, and the long-term result of the work of being a Buddhist is to rid the mind utterly of the neurotic ones. Because he says they are the source of suffering now, and acting upon them sows seeds in our mind, because acting upon them means you act out of attachment, you act out of anger, you act out of jealousy, you act out of resentment, you do things to harm others. It's not love that propels you to kill somebody. It's not generosity that propels you to steal. You know, it's called anger and all those negative states of mind. It's almost too simple to hear, but it's very evident, you know. So the simplest way of saying it is, the Buddha is saying the predominance of positive qualities now, which we can cultivate, is the source of my own happiness now. My mind is more light. And therefore acting on the basis of those, being generous, being patient, not killing, not stealing, not lying. They will sow seeds in my mind. They will program me and turn me into the future, into a happy person. He's meaning that quite literally. It's the meaning of karma. You know, he's talking, of course, countless lives as well, not just this life. And that the negative ones, the unhappy ones, the constricted ones, the ones that are the kind of the voice of ego, the voice of the limited sense of self, they cause me worry. Just the very having of depression, the very having of anxiety, the very having of anger is why I am suffering right now. And this is very hard to see. I don't think I'm suffering because of my anger. I think I'm suffering because the person did something mean to me. They did, but the Buddha is saying what's in my mind is the main player. This is very hard to see. So how does this play into activism? Nothing wrong with being a political activist. Tibetans are the best political activists, you know. They don't sit there going, oh, it's all karma, come and take our country. You know, if we think about karma, we think of it like that. No. I mean, I have a friend. Anyway, never mind. We'll discuss. So, okay, so how does compassion benefit you when you're being a political activist? Well, don't worry about Buddhist view. I remember Martin Luther King way back in the 60s, or 70s, when I was an old political activist. I remember he said, you know, it is good to be angry, meaning it's good to find fault. Okay, that's what we have to distinguish. This is a massive point, but I'll say it briefly here. What we have to distinguish between is the bare bones assessment of a problem. If you say there is war in Ukraine, that's a fact. That's not anger. But then what happens is immediately, depending on your position, on whom you support, anger is following. So we assume finding fault equals anger. No. Finding fault, if it's there, that's fact. There is a war. But as Martin Luther King said, it's good to see there is injustice, there is racism, there is this, there is that. That's fact. But then you say, what can I do to help? Now that's compassion. That's perfect. But the thing is here, adding on to Martin Luther King, and I'm sure he meant this, but this is the Buddhist view. And this is much harder to see. If we take the view of karma, that everything every single being thinks and does and says programs that person into the person they become. And if we take the view that acting upon virtuous thoughts and virtuous thoughts and acting positively produces a happy person, and being angry and killing and stealing and lying and harming produces a suffering person, then that is the very basis for having compassion for the person who harms. We don't like to hear this one bit because we love to have anger. We love to blame. We don't know how else to find the reason why bad things are happening, because we have to point a finger to somebody and we have to hate them, equal to the compassion. You know? But the Buddha's view is everybody is either suffering at the hands of others or is causing suffering to others, and both are suffering. And I think that's manageable and understandable if we look right back at ourselves. So you look into your own life. You might not go around raping and killing too many people, but have a look at anything you've ever done that has harmed another. Just bad-mouthing your mother, shouting at your wife, you know, not paying your taxes, whatever, something simple. We all do this. Have a look. What motivated that? What was in the mind at the time? It was not compassion. It was not love. It was not kindness. It was not a wish to be ethical. It was the opposite. So if everything we think and do and say that's labeled negative harms me, then that's what motivates you to start practicing. In the Buddhist path, very first level of practice is you don't want future suffering, so therefore you stop causing it. Because Buddha's deal is that what I think and I do and I say is the main cause for who I become. That's the meaning of karma. That's the basic, fundamental starting point, entry level Buddhist practice. And that demands, and we don't hear this much in the West. We don't like to hear this. So when we hear about not killing, oh, I shouldn't kill. We think, and you say, why not? Oh, well, because it's compassion. Others suffer. People don't want to suffer. It's true. But what we never factor in is that my killing someone first harms me. Right there. Forget about the future. Right there. So when you know that for yourself, you know that your anxiety and your anger and your depression and your jealousy and your low self-esteem and your arrogance are what harm you now, and therefore what motivate you to do things to harm others. Now you have a basis for having, if you like, compassion for yourself and you want to stop, and that gives you a basis for having compassion for the harmers. We don't like to do that. We'd rather have anger. But it's not too complicated, I don't think. Forget about long-term karma. But the only way to have compassion for the harmer, even just from the point of view of their harming themselves now, their suffering at this minute, is to know your own mind. So we easily skip over that. I think it's a huge point, this one. So, okay, so how can having compassion for the Chinese communists destroying the Tibetan country, how can that work? Sounds ridiculous, isn't it? that Tibetans have a view of the Tibetans, of the typical Tibetans, they have a view of karma. It's inbuilt, it's ingrained in their being, it's in their culture for 1,000 years plus. It's shocking to our ears, the way they talk. Typical. I'm not saying all Tibetans are a saint. I'm not saying that. That's typical. It's a culture that's had Buddhism embedded in it since about the 7th century. And then that view of karma has been embedded in Asia before that, in India, several thousand years. Was the worldview that prevailed, was in the bones of their being, was just embedded in them. It was an assumption they took as a given, like we take materialism as a given. We take neuroscience as a given. We take it as a given that our mother makes us, our father makes us, our creator makes us. It's something we don't question, Well, the Buddhist view is quite different. So I remember, my friends, 2 stories. I always tell these 2 stories. One friend of mine, Jigdrol, years ago, he went in 87 when there was the first kind of mini uprising in Lhasa. It was all the monks and nuns, all the radical monks and nuns who were the ones who were doing the uprising, getting arrested, getting tortured, getting killed. So my friend Jigdrol was involved in that. He was like 13 or 17 or something, I can't remember. And he got arrested. He got tortured, he got then released, and then he's demonstrating again. His friend had his hand blown off. He thought he'd better escape, so he escaped, and he was on lists and things. So his father was murdered, brother was murdered, and he was telling me about it, and there were tears, in his eyes. And I said, Jigdrol, do you ever get angry? And he laughed very casually. He said, "Laugh, Robina, what for? Don't be silly. It's our own fault," he said. That's too heavy for our ears, isn't it? We can't hear that. It sounds heavy for our ears. It just means he has a view of karma embedded in his mind. It's just a view of the world that is assumed. So, of course, those of us in the West who want to take on the view of karma, Buddhism, I mean, I love the view. I think it's great. I think it's the best view I've heard. It's what I'm working with. Like anything, you just get used to it. But the key thing is the way it informs your life. It's not just some theory in your head. It has to inform the way you live. So when you have that view, yes, you see the injustice in Tibet. There's no question that it's called injustice. It's a fact. People are being harmed. Then what we tend to do is, oh, well, it was all their karma, then they deserve it. So what do you mean have compassion? That's terribly fatalistic. That's really nihilistic. That's awful. So when you understand this view of karma, and you are deciding you want to defend the Tibetans or defend the poor people or whatever group it is you want to defend against the people who are doing the harm, nothing wrong. But what we've got to understand is it doesn't need to be anger that compels you to do it. It's compassion. It's the way Martin Luther King said it. Was so simple. What can I do to help? That's it. Instead of ranting and raving and shouting and yelling. What good does that do? And I remember the Dalai Lama, years ago, he was interviewed by some journalist who said anger seems to be very productive. It makes you act. And Dalai Lama said, I know what you mean. But he said, when anger is the main motivation, it doesn't last. When it's compassion, you don't give up. And look at Martin Luther King. He's incredible. He just never gave up. He was as steady as a rock. He didn't seem to show anger, but he never gave up. But you rant and rave, you give up afterwards. It's exhausting. And you get fed up and don't care, Anger's not sustainable. So it's not easy not to have anger. So that's where the key understanding have to distinguish between simply finding fault, saying it's a fact there is injustice. It's a fact. What can I do to help? So coming more from compassion than attachment and anger causes you to do what you can without fantasy expectations of everything becoming perfect. And then you can, therefore you are able to have compassion for the harmers because you see they are harming themselves. I always think about pedophiles. The only person who has compassion for a pedophile is their mum. Because she sees that her beloved boy is harming himself. That's compassion. Instead of anger. They say the bodhisattvas have the greatest compassion for us in general because we don't have this view of karma. We don't realize that we are the main creators of our own suffering and our own happiness, short-term and long-term. That's the fundamental core teaching in the entire view of the universe from the Buddhist perspective. You mightn't like it, and people in the West who are Buddhists don't like it. Many people never even think about karma. I don't think it's relevant, But that's in all the literature. You go right back, it's all there, coming from these Indians, these genius Indians, you know. And it's the basis of having compassion, both for yourself and others. Because what we think and do and say produces the person we become. What we think and do and say is the main cause of my happiness and my suffering now and in the future. So now you have to ask me some questions. Let it go where now take it where it has to go. Ask me some questions. Yes, sweetheart.
Karma
Oh, I see. Okay.
and suffering and karma and compassion.
Okay.
I
So you
don't-
mean you don't know how karma works?
I guess that's true.
Okay, good. Let's talk about it. Because it's very, I mean, it's something that, yeah, I mean, it's very shocking. As a generally speaking, quite a shocking philosophical view if we look at it, the materialist view that we have in the West. Okay, I mean, no, let's forget about karma. Let's just. Okay, why don't you tell me, from the point of view of this topic, compassion activism, when you hear that, what do you hear? How do you hear it? How would you say that would play out in your life? Yep. Okay. For compassion for whom? That's the point, I suppose, isn't it? Compassion for the people who are suffering. How would you say? Compassion. Yeah. There you go. That's okay. Let's talk about that. That's perfect. That's good enough. That is perfect. Okay. This other one of karma is a long-term, bigger picture one, and we don't have to go there. We don't have to go there at all. This is already incredible. It's already incredible. This is really, really true. I think this is. Thank you very much. It's a really good point. It's a really good point because what happens often, we're motivated by distress and despair and anger, aren't we? When it comes to political activity, I think it's a really good point. You know, such a nice way you said that. Thank you so much. It gives purpose to life, doesn't it? I mean, I think that's also something I think that when we see the terrible suffering of the world, and you know you can't go to Ukraine and stop the war tomorrow, you know you can't go to Gaza and bring up all the people and make them alive again and fix everything and make the Israelis and the Palestinians love each other. You know, and it's unbearable. Every time we read the news, it's like unbearable. So it's easy to either completely put our head in the sand because it's so pain and despair and shout and yell. And both of those are utterly useless. And this is the point now. Your point is so good. Thank you. But from one's own perspective, if we can go to Gaza tomorrow, this is the point. If we can go, I will pay your fare, I promise, and do something. But we mostly know we can't. Things are so unbearable some places. So what then I think there's another point now. What can I do then? So there's no benefit in despairing. Because we know if we look into history, nothing's new. We always think, oh, the world's getting worse. I'm sorry, it might be, but it's not, nothing's new. We're seeing there's always people harming each other, always suffering, always poverty, always war. Whatever your analysis of why, that's another discussion. Here we're looking at the Buddhist one, but never mind. But I feel if we can't go to Gaza, you can't go to Ukraine, you can't make all the poor people rich, you can't you can't stop the mean people. But we can do something right here, right now. And if we can be content with that, that I think gives us courage, you know. I remember one time when I was running a non-profit to help people in prison, there was a little conference in DC, a half a day, and it was run by a bunch of different religious people who were fed up with the fundamentalist Christians running kind of dominating the voice, you know, in this country. And there was this really just 20, 30 groups, little groups of little people, some Muslim, some Christian, some Buddhist, some this, some that. They're particularly religious. They were religious. But these good little groups of people all doing some little thing to help. And I think that's incredible because we've got the big picture and we've got individuals, like your point is so powerful. And we can be driven by compassion to want to be of benefit to others. Then this has an incredible ripple effect and it makes life worthwhile. You help the dog next door, you help the ant, you help your next door neighbor, you help your mother, because that then gives us some courage, you know, and opens our heart. We can't make everything go away. We can't make all the pain go away, but we can do something, you know. Do you agree with that? I think your point is so good. Thank you so much for saying it that way. Forget karma, okay? Don't worry about karma. Thank you. That was so helpful. Because you got the big picture, all the world and the suffering, and then you got yourself.
And there's no advantage in being despairing. There's no advantage to oneself to be despairing and depressed and anxious or angry. It just causes you suffering in your family and the people around you. It's just ripples. It's awful. So we have to find some way. And as you just said, it gives purpose. That's brilliant. Thank you. I won't forget that. It gives purpose for oneself. And then whoever you affect, you can affect people around you, you know. And that also means we've got to be a bit humble and know the world is still a suffering place. So let's look, though, this is an interesting point. Let's look at the Buddhist view of why we suffer so terribly when we see suffering out there, why we do despair, why we do get angry easily and despair or get depressed. And this gets us to this fundamental Buddhist view about the way the mind works, you know. As I said before, it's almost seemingly simple. We've got these unhappy, neurotic kind of the voices of ego, and they cause us to be constricted, narrow, unhappy, dissatisfied. And the main energy of those is called attachment. And attachment is this multifaceted state of mind that is dissatisfaction, never satisfied. No matter what happens, it's not enough. No matter what I do, it's not enough. No matter what I achieve, it's never enough. It's always dissatisfaction. And this drives so much of our suffering, you know. And the response of that attachment often is anger or depression and despair if it's internalized, you know. So by having this view of having some compassion, having empathy, wanting to help others, even just helping a little bit here and there, it lifts you. And then if you lessen this neediness for the world to be a lovely place, because you can't, attachment, you see, is this junkie that only wants everything to be lovely. It can't cope with suffering. But if you have less attachment, you're more realistic. And you recognize suffering as the way the world is, and you have whatever analysis you have, it's up to you to decide your own analysis. I mean, I've got the Buddhist one. It's up to you, you know. Then you're more realistic and you do what you can and you be content with that. And you do what you can. That grows you and you help others. That was on the big picture. If you can be like Mother Teresa, or if you can go like, I mean, some people do tremendously powerful things just being one person, you know, you can do so much. Some people can do so much to help, you know, but you do your own thing, one little thing, which is good for you and therefore good for others. Because even, as I said, you know, if you can help one dog, you feel better. You can't go to Gaza, but you can help one dog, one person. That's very powerful. It's humble, you know, but it's very powerful. Yes.
I'm wondering if there are any Buddhist practices that help to cultivate compassion towards people who cause harm.
Do the harmers, that's right, exactly. Well, that's the thing that I was doing before, giving the analysis of giving the basis for why you'd have compassion. So have you got anybody you're very close to who is angry and upset all the time? And can you see that they're harming themselves? There you go. That's the answer. That's the answer, darling. That's the answer. Right there. But you've got to have the willingness to see that, especially if they're harming you. Do you understand my point? And then you look at yourself and you see anything you've ever done to harm others, you maybe didn't do that much, but we've all done something. It's not coming from a good place. It's coming when you're upset or angry or jealous or resentful. Do you see my point? So when we know that in ourselves, having compassion for ourselves, this is a starting point, is seeing the pain that causes me and I'm sick of that pain, so I want to change. Then you have a space to be able to have compassion for your sister and therefore even the ex-husband who's cheated on you. You understand? But that's where another big trouble here, though, is when we say the word compassion, we can also be a bit sentimental. Oh, the poor thing can't help it. So while the python is eating you alive, oh, the poor python, it can't help it. Excuse me, get out of its way. So if you might have this wacko ex-husband who really is suffering, but because of their own demented, crazy mind, they're harming you very badly, you cannot afford to be sentimental. You can have compassion, but it's wise compassion. You see my point? That's really huge. That's where our compassion can be a bit sentimental and weak. It's soft. It's not really valid. Compassion is very powerful because you're seeing that everybody's harming themselves and you have the wisdom to know how to help your husband. And maybe it leaves him, and maybe leaving him and not going anywhere near him again is the best solution. And just still doesn't mean you can't have compassion. That's a really important point. Do you understand? That's really important. That's why if we only have compassion for the innocent victims, it's too hard to have compassion for the mean, ugly people because we can't see a reason. It's because they're harming themselves. Does it make sense, doesn't it? Yeah. You've got to practice that every day. but also be wise. Keep out of their way, no question. Do you understand me? But very sensible, very intelligent. Yeah. What else, people? Some other points? Yes, at the back. Where's the mic?
Hello, thank you so much for your talk.
Mm.
I'll come forward.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
So I'm kind of curious to come back to this topic of karma and perhaps how it may fit into this view.
Okay.
And forgive my ignorance, but I'm reminded of the Hindu view of karma and
Which
sort
view?
of
The Hindu view.
and the yogas, which like define these different periods of time that form sort of like a cycle. So there's a creation and sustaining, and then ultimately a destruction, and that karma kind of follows this cycle. And I'm wondering, especially within the view of activism, if there are any Buddhist views that may kind of bring some clarity around any sort of cycles.
Yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying. It's very similar, but this is a very big picture. It's talking in terms of eons of time. Of course, it's very similar. I mean, the Hindus, these Indians, as the Dalai Lama says, it was these ingenious Indians more than 3,000 years ago. They were the ones who began the investigation to the nature of self. They're the ones who set up this philosophical view that is still Buddha went as far as he could go in that view and took it with him. He didn't chuck it all out. So there's very similar views about the universe and time and everything. Of course, it's very similar, very similar. But the real discussion about karma, now that you brought it up, is part of all that. But it's really more now, maybe this is getting to back to you now, speaking in a simple way about it. The view of in Buddhism, so yeah, the answer is yes. But I can't say more about it. But now I want to go into this new thing, so you can relax and give the microphone back unless you have more to just sit there and relax.
Well, I guess I'm
Go on, though.
curious
You want to
then
say
how
more?
this may play into
How does
the
what?
how this may play into the dichotomy between
What's that
acceptance,
word, yeah? How does what play?
the duality, I guess, between acceptance and activism.
Oh, I see, okay. What do you mean by acceptance? What do you mean by acceptance? I mean, I didn't say those words, so what do you mean?
Yes. How can I discern between a passive acceptance and an active acceptance? Does that...
Okay, no, I hear. Okay, passive acceptance is, I would say, oh, well, it's just the way the world is, nothing to do. That's what I'd say is complete passive and useless and nihilistic. But acceptance in a simple sense is there is a war in Ukraine. There are poor people. There are people being murdered in Gaza. Let's say that's acceptance. That's a fact. But anger is ranting and raving, saying it shouldn't be like this. And why is it like this? And how dare it be this way? And if only it's not this way, it's all if and but and should. That's all meaningless. It is this way. That's acceptance. It's a reality. Then the next question is, as Martin Luther King said, what can I do to help? Can you hear that? Is that what you mean by acceptance? What do you mean by acceptance? I mean, you use the word.
It's a great question.
Yeah. What? Yes. Good, go on.
For an activist, acceptance is very scary.
For an activist, what?
Acceptance is very scary. Okay, it's almost like saying, oh, it's okay. They're killing children. They're killing babies. Animals are
okay. So that
away from the acceptance is very scary for me.
No, but that's the one. I think that's the one that's called the. That's called the. That's a really. Now keep the microphone. It's a really good point you're saying. Keep the microphone. Keep the mic. Let's discuss. Let's discuss with you.
Okay.
So that to me that's what I think is conveyed by the word acceptance in our culture. But my feeling is that's the passive acceptance. Well, because you just said, oh, well, they're killing babies. No, what I'm saying is keep something really simple. You broke your cup, okay? And so what happens is, oh my God, I broke a cup. You shouldn't have broken a cup. That was grandma's best cup. So acceptance is the fact that the cup is broken. Not, oh, well, nothing to do, who cares? But it's a fact, unadorned by attachment, anger, fear. It's a bare fact. Then comes action after that. So that's a good, acceptance is not meaning passive, is not meaning no action. I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Well, but accepting it is validating it.
No, no, it's not. That's my, no, that's my point. That's the
Can't
analysis I'm,
Accept
no,
injustice.
but that's not the
cannot
analysis.
accept injustice.
I understand, darling. That's not the
Okay.
analysis. Keep the microphone. That's not the analysis I'm giving it here. That's your definition of acceptance. And I'm telling you that's not my definition, but that's up to you to decide whatever other word you'd like. So what word would you say instead? When you see the war in Palestine, let's say, what's your response? What's the words you
understand.
use?
I
That's the next step.
understand
No,
that
that's the next
it's
step.
happening.
That's the next step.
But
That's-
I will
that's-
not validate it. I will not condone it.
Are you hearing me say that? I'm trying to discuss what I'm saying.
I'm
not-
sorry.
No, don't
No,
be sorry. I'm
no.
trying to have a conversation. So why would saying there is a war in Palestine, why would that suggest passivity? Just saying those words, it's a fact, isn't it? Would you agree it's a fact?
Yes, that's a fact.
That's a fact. So that's what I'm saying by acceptance. It's a fact.
Okay.
Then the next step, as Martin Luther King said, is what can I do to help? So what I mean by acceptance is a bare bones, this is reality. Oh my God, what can I do? Rather than how dare, it shouldn't be, oh my God, meaning instead of responding with anger, you respond with intelligence and compassion. That's what I'm saying, the way I'm putting it. You understand me? Is that,
Oh,
how,
yes.
is that how you see
I
it?
think I just don't like the word.
No, then don't
acceptance
use
for
it. Then
culture.
don't use it.
It's too passive.
Don't use it
maybe,
then.
For
No problem.
activism, my opinion. I'm going to give back the mic though.
All right, sweetheart. Thank you very much. Somebody else have something to say or ask? I was going to go into some detail, wasn't I? But never mind. Yes, sweetheart. Yes, go on.
One, I was talking about you help me even once I've reached that step. And I say, okay, what can I do to help? It's a very simple.
Yeah, so how is the... Okay, no, it doesn't. So then...
And that's what I was looking at the purpose for, because there's this sort of guideline things must create. There's time, you must expand, and then there's story we create again. And there's this in the Western world, there's a saying that I rather like. It's something along the lines of hard times, great for strong men for each.
Sure, I understand your point. I understand, yeah. I understand you. I understand. So that's, okay, so the thing is that people on Zoom didn't hear that because that's why they need the mic, you see. They didn't hear you. So it's never mind now, it doesn't matter. So, okay. Well, when you say the Buddhist view help you, you've got to know which part of the Buddhist view you're talking about, you know. So this is why, okay, the general idea in the Buddhist view, which is based in the view of karma, which I haven't gone into, is that everybody's suffering. Okay, I have to talk about karma then. I want to give the simple view of karma, the Buddhist view, which is absolutely integrated into the entire Buddhist view of the universe. So if you've got the materialist view, which is a scientific view, which says we are only material, and we track ourselves back to mummy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, and back to the monkeys and all that, don't we? That's the view. That's one philosophical view of the world. And the scientific view, the neuroscientific view, the psychological views of the world in general, in the modern world, are rooted in that view of the world. The Christian view, for example, is that you track yourself back to God, a creator who runs the universe. You know, that's a whole other view. Well, the Buddhist view is we don't need a creator. And on the other hand, our mother and father didn't create us either. The Buddhist view is that there are trillions upon trillions of consciousnesses, of minds. Mind and consciousness in Buddhism are synonymous. And this consciousness of ours, these thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of my inner being is one thing about me, and my physicality is another, and they work hand in hand. So the consciousness, from the Buddhist perspective, if we track back, where do I come from? The Christian one, you track back to God. The materialist one, you track back to grandma, grandpa, and the genes, and so on and so forth. The Buddhist one is if you track your consciousness back as like an unbroken chain of mental moments, you're going to track yourself back inexorably to the first second of conception in your mother's womb. We understand that. So this is where the business of so-called reincarnation and karma, which is rooted in the whole Buddhist view of the universe, which comes from the Hindu view, But you know yourself at the time of conception, it was the egg came from mummy's body and the sperm came from daddy's body. But if you've got a consciousness or a mind which isn't physical and is not called a soul, there's no equivalent in Buddhism. It's your mind or your consciousness, which has got subtler levels and grosser levels. So at the second of conception, the second before conception, we know the egg was in mother's body, the sperm was in father's body. Well, where was your consciousness? Well, you track it back to a moment before that. It's its own continuity of unbroken. It's an unbroken chain of mental moments. So the previous moment before that was the continuity of mind, clearly a more subtle level, and you track it back a few weeks, it was in a previous body, and a few weeks before that in a previous body. This is, simply speaking, the fundamental view in the entire, that came from the Hindu view and the Buddhist view of the universe. This is the observation of the Buddha. It's not made up by somebody. It's not coming from a creator. We're not the source of some creator. There's no concept of creator in Buddhism. So the perspective, therefore, is if your mind is yours, and then the second point is that every millisecond of what you think and do and say is the very process that produces you second by second by second. The main player in the person I am now and who I will be in the future is my mind, and therefore my actions on the basis of my mind. That we are our own, Dalai Lama would say karma is like self-creation. So one of the views that's implied by this is there's no concept of punishment and reward. There's no punisher, there's no rewarder. You are the fruit of what you have done, good and bad. So then there's enormous accountability comes from that. And then on the basis of this, realizing that we create our own suffering. So when I see a person harming others, my heart will break for them because they're harming themselves and creating unbearable future suffering. That is the basis of real, of powerful compassion, as well as compassion for my family and my sisters and my country people. Do you understand? That's the Buddhist answer. Okay. That's, roughly speaking, the Buddhist view. That lady who asked me, what was your name? May I know your name? Your wonderful point about compassion, that lady. Yes. Susan, that's a quick, just a quick thing on karma, okay? That's the Buddhist view. You understand? So from that perspective, talking to you now, from that perspective, for all of you, then knowing that every being, the rat, the dog, the human, the pedophile, the kind person, the mean person, Mr. Trump, whoever you think is, on the one hand, is the fruit mainly of their own past. Therefore, if they're acting negatively, it's the habit of having done that. So then you can only have compassion for them because the more they do that, the more they're harming themselves and producing a horrible person. Speaking very simply. And therefore, coming from compassion, it can be for everybody, but it's not a sentimental thing, and it's not only for victims. But the only way you're going to have compassion is by first having it for yourself. There's two wings of the bird, the wisdom wing and the compassion wing. And as the Dalai Lama says, compassion is the point, but it's not enough. You've got to have wisdom. And the wisdom wing is the nuts and bolts of abiding by the laws of karma yourself, knowing your own mind intimately, knowing that you're sick of suffering, wanting to change because of that and turn yourself into a marvelous, happy person, wanting to be happy, nothing wrong with that, and knowing that you can do it. And then on the basis of this, you lessen the neuroses and you break down the barriers between self and other, created by attachment and anger and all the neuroses. And then you could only end up having compassion for others because we're all in the same boat, you know. That's, generally speaking, the Buddhist approach to compassion and activism. All right? But one step at a time.
So, Robina, I want
Yes.
to ask you about suffering because
Yep.
you were talking about
Yep.
obvious suffering we
Yep.
could all understand, and that
Yep.
is people are poor, they're sick, they're in a war, they're being tortured.
Yes.
Okay, there's that.
Yes.
And then there's the happy person
That's right.
who's, seems that life is good.
That's right. Some people have a life like that. Exactly.
And are you saying that's a form of suffering as well?
Okay. Now this is where we get to the more nuanced level. Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Okay. The reference point, the only way to really see it properly is the bigger picture reference point. The Buddha's view is that he has found from his own experience that we can rid the mind utterly of all the neuroses. That's what nirvana means. It's not some place like heaven. It's the inner job of unpacking and unraveling your mind to the subtlest degree, seeing and recognizing these neuroses, which are all these conceptual stories in our head and the bones of our being, we're able to unpack and unravel them and rid our mind of them utterly. And why would we want to? Because they're the cause of suffering. So now, the subtler one is called attachment. Attachment is this kind of constant emotional hunger to get nice things. Acting on the basis of goodness, we will get nice things. But what happens is we become attached to them. So the suffering of losing nice things is almost worse than having the suffering. Do you hear what I'm saying? So that's really, it's like the shadow of happiness. It's not meant to be depressing. It's marvelous to have things go well, but everything's it's sort of like the certain amount of petrol in the tank. And when the virtuous karma runs out, the happiness will stop. You get old, the husband dies, the husband leaves you, you get sick, the money leaves, you lose the job. It's not being depressing, it's reality. So if we're caught up in the bubble of the happiness, which if we're caught up in that bubble and cling to it as permanent, then the suffering when it changes, which it will because it's just the nature of life, will be unbearable. Do you see, that's really the view. So when we have happiness, realizing it's the fruit of my virtue, delighting in my virtue, wanting to keep creating more happiness and enjoying every second of it and having compassion and wanting to help others get it. And then when it changes, because you're not living in a fantasy world, you won't go crazy. You'll be able to ride the tide of life. You see, it's a more nuanced level of suffering. We all understand it. In other words, when things are going blissfully well, but it all suddenly changes, which is so often what happens, that suffering is almost worse. The pain of losing the beautiful things is almost worse than just having the bad. Because you're living in this bubble, you're living in a fantasy and clinging to it inevitably, Do you understand me? So to really be aware of that doesn't mean you chuck out the happiness. Oh, well, it'll all change anyway. No, knowing that impermanence is the nature of reality, then you are more realistic and you will enjoy it all the more, not clinging to it. And that's quite hard to see, the clinging. It's quite hard to see it. Do you understand? Yes, I think we understand it. I think we do. Thank you so much. What else? Ask me some questions.
I think you already answered it. I think listening to you has made me realize that the more negative we feel about injustices in the world, it just feeds my own aversion, my own anger. And then I'm creating, what am I doing? I'm creating negative karma for myself because now my mind.
And they're not very effective in the end. Yeah, that's right. I agree. But it's hard not to be angry, isn't it?
Say that again.
Hard not to be angry.
That's right. Yes,
but it's so much suffering. And you see such awful things people are doing to each other. It's very hard not to get upset. So it takes a lot of courage to not think it's just being passive. Your point down back there, So Beth's point, it seems to me, she didn't say the word anger, but my feeling is it's easy. If we feel, I don't want to be angry, then it does feel that you're becoming passive. So I think we almost can't distinguish between seeing the suffering and seeing how terrible it is. We assume anger is a natural response. So then we think, oh, well, there's no point in being angry. So then we think, oh, well, I'm just being passive. But it's not like that. It is definitely more nuanced than that. Are we communicating here, people? Just in general, are we communicating? So it's hard to distinguish anger from simply finding fault. It's a fact that there is injustice. It's a fact that there is suffering. It's a fact that there's bad people doing things. It's a fact. So how to say that and see it nakedly without getting angry, but also being active and thinking, what can I do to help? That's the key, and that's the compassion. Do you understand, Beth? Does it make sense to you?
Yes.
Good, darling. Wonderful. And really, this demands a lot of inner clarity. It doesn't come naturally. We've got to be very aware of our mind and make conscious decisions. That's why I thought Martin Luther King was just amazing. The way he said it was so simple. He said, the way he put it is, it's good to be angry. He means it's good to find fault, to recognize the fact that, he said, there is injustice, there is racism, but then you say, what can I do to it? It was so simple how he put it. And then the way the Dalai Lama put it. If it's mainly anger, which seems energetic, that's motivating your action, he said it won't last. That we have to see. But if it's compassion, you won't give up. And then I'd say, this is the point, you're benefiting both others and yourself. That's the key. That's Susan's point. Yes.
So,
Microphone, please, here. This really demands thinking, you know, it's not that easy. These words are kind of one thing, but really looking inside, you know? Yes.
So so far we've kind of been addressing this in the context of Gaza.
Yeah, right, sure. Physical activity, yes, yes.
And I think about a situation in my life where I've come to the conclusion, what little wisdom I have, that I can actually do nothing. And I'll kind of give you the outline of my son is so angry at his ex-partner.
Yeah.
I mean, so angry
Yes.
that he won't see their child.
I understand.
He can't bring himself
Sure.
to see his daughter.
Unbearable, yes.
I have a relationship with her.
Yes.
But, you know, trying to talk to him
Yes.
about it
That's it.
just is incendiary.
Yes.
It's like
I hear it.
napalm.
No, I hear
You
it.
know.
I really hear your point. And
So
yeah.
I mean, I've said to him, what I say to him every time it comes up is just that being angry is like eating poison and expecting somebody else to die.
Yes.
And he just doesn't,
Yeah, that's right.
you know.
That's it.
And so my conclusion is I can do nothing.
I understand.
And that's the wisdom, but it hurts,
Yes.
you know.
It hurts
that-
unbearably. To see your son so suffering, it must be
Yeah,
unbearable.
it's-
Yes.
It's really unbearable.
That's
I
it.
do see that he's suffering,
Yes, exactly.
but
Exactly. So then really, I suppose for you, I suppose the only way what you're effectively saying is you can't do anything directly to help, but all you can do is love him, and maybe stop giving him advice. Just love
I
him.
have stopped giving.
That's
him
it, yeah.
Advice.
Because he can't hear it. That's the thing. That's where it's so, you know, one is compassion, but then compassion isn't the way. The passion is having your heart that sees his suffering, but compassion doesn't enable you to help him. It's wisdom that enables you to help him. So even though you're right, I understand your point. There's nothing overtly you can do except love him for who he is and let him see that. And maybe one day his heart will open. Isn't it? For your own sake, you have no choice.
I think the other, you know, difficult
Yeah.
moment is
Yeah.
when I've spent time with his daughter and
Yes.
I can't tell him about it.
And what?
I can't tell him.
No,
about
that's it, exactly.
I
Donna.
can't say, oh, I saw.
I know,
Dan,
sweetheart, it
saw."
must be so difficult.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. I understand.
But that saying about anger being a pill that you take, that you think is gonna kill somebody else.
Say that again, that last part.
The saying about anger being a poison you take, thinking it will kill somebody.
Yeah, that's right.
else.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that helps me.
Helps you to me. Yes, I hear it.
myself
Yes,
that.
yeah. But that's where it really is tremendously hard when he's caught up in that amount of hurt. He literally can't see he's causing himself suffering, and that's the trouble, isn't it? That's the tragedy, isn't it? Because he's so convinced that she's causing it, but he doesn't see he's got the choice. This is, I think, is our greatest pain on the planet, that we don't realize. And that's why, for me, I mention often working with people in prison who don't have the luxury of making any choices, but the only choice they have is to change their mind. And that's a pretty intense one to say. I think that's I have to say, I think that's when we're really making advanced progress in and we realize that what we think and we feel impacts upon ourselves. Forget about what it does to others. And when you're in prison, you don't have the luxury of making any, you either go mad or you change your own mind, you know. That's very hard to come to. Most people I know in prison who are suffering wrongly sentenced and those kind of things. It's almost impossible to be able to see that you can learn to be a happy person. That's why I always use the example of one woman. She's a friend of mine. She died recently. Sunny, who'd been in prison for 17 years on death row, in a cell on her own, isolated, totally innocent. Her husband was executed. His head burst into flames. She lost her family, lost her children, lost her family, and innocent, right? 17 years. And she said she was at some point, she said, I realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So she literally found her own, she had no particular religion, she had no particular view of karma or anything. She learned yoga and she was in her own cell, and she learned literally to unpack and unravel her emotions and realize she could change, could give up the anger, give up the rage, give up the despair, slowly, 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 you know. And she succeeded. It was incredible. And she got freedom eventually. That's, I think, so that's really advanced practice. Well, we can't see that our own neuroses harm us. Do you see my point? It's incredible, isn't it? That's the worst pain, I think. When we can see this, we're pretty advanced, I'd say. That what we think and feel first has impact upon us, you know. And then we have that, then we can have compassion for others. So you can really see, you can have compassion for your son. The harm he's doing to himself is unbearable. Very amazing. Thank you for telling us. Like I said, this demands a lot of inner work, a lot of inner awareness, really hard work, you know. As she puts it, learning to be our own therapists, I tell you. It's not that easy.
Hi, I'm wondering if you would think about emptiness for us, you know, and how it might intertwine with harm. Well,
I understand you. Okay, all of these teachings in Buddhism lead to the most advanced, the most, you know, subtle, sophisticated, whatever way you want to talk it, way of talking about how things exist. And it sounds very esoteric to us. So what the Buddha is saying is, in general, these unhappy states of mind, attachment and anger and jealousy and low self-esteem and resentment, and we know them all so intimately. We don't have to give them all fancy Greek names like we do in modern psychology, you know. We know these intimately. He is saying, he's identified that these are the source of our pain. So one of the characteristics they all have, and we see this with your son as a perfect example, is when we are caught up in one of those states of mind, so maybe use your son as an example, because we're all the same. He's full of anger and rage, hurt, resentment, bitterness, whatever words you like. What we see is that he's painting a picture with that energy. He's painting a very specific picture of his ex-wife. May I say that? That's what you're saying, isn't it? And it's a totally evil picture. You understand my point? He sees her every inch from the top, from the tip of her hair to her toenails as an evil person. The whole of her being is painted with the one brush of anger. We can see we do that, can't we? Now, this is the meaning of dependent arising. When you know yourself, when someone feels that about you, you know you're not what they think. You know that they're exaggerating your badness. So what he is doing now, his anger is painting the whole of her based on one action she did. The whole of her, he sees that picture. And it's an absolute picture set in stone. Well, all Buddha's saying is things are more subtle than that. She's got other qualities. So if you look into your own life, one of the really powerful ways to change the view you have of a person. I was talking to a friend of mine recently who's mad at his wife, right? Upset. And he's very quiet. He doesn't get angry. He's quiet, but it's all internalized. So he's kind of annoyed. She doesn't do this for him and doesn't do that for him, but it's all suppressed. And he came out and he realized he's got this anger towards her. So he's painting a certain picture of her. So he's resentful of her. I said, I mean, it's not that paint, but it's not that bad, but he can see it. And I said, well, how about painting a new picture of her? She's not just that. She's got other qualities. So try and make a list of all the things that she's done for you that are good. And it was almost so simple, and it was completely mind-blowing for him. Do you see what I'm saying? That's really putting emphasis into reality, darling. The delusions they're concrete, fixed, and they exaggerate. You know, they exaggerate. So when we're more in touch with reality, things are more nuanced, more subtle, more dependent arising, more changing moment by moment, and there's more to it than just that. And that's the key function of these crazy states of mind. They paint a solid picture, and that's the tragedy, is that's the picture that appears, as Lama Zopa says, that picture appears back to us, as if it's got nothing to do with me. Your son does not think he's creating an evil picture there. He thinks he's seeing reality. This is the tragedy. This is the tragedy. This is putting dependent rising into practice, honey. Do you understand me? So, oh, another friend of mine, I mean, very commonly we hate our mums, you know, we love to hate our mothers. Of course, in the West, you've got to blame your mother because she made you, you know. Isn't it? You come from your mum and the mum always gets the blame. I don't know about the father, but the mother seems to get the blame. So you just have to, you know, a friend of mine recently too, a Buddhist, so she always hated her mother for years and years. Her mum was neurotic. Yeah, you can be neurotic. Join the universe, folks. But somehow we're so shocked that our mother should be neurotic. I mean, but we think that our mother should be a bloody saint. I don't know why, because they're my mother, you know. You might have a neurotic mother, I agree. Meanwhile, she's done some good things for you, so paint the new picture. So she started to paint this new picture. She went home and she took care of her, and look at why she died of cancer. And now she adores her mother because she painted a new picture. This shows the power of the mind, I tell you. Do you understand? Things don't have a character. The key thing, the way Buddha says, why these unhappy states of mind causes pain is because they do this, they exaggerate, they distort. Now look at attachment. And this is one of the ways to answer the question to Susan. When wonderful things are happening, because we all have attachment, which is this attachment like this junkie in us that wants only the lovely things. So when it gets the lovely things, that is what we call happiness. And it's true, it is happiness. You are in love and your family is good and you have the money in the bank and the husband is kind. Wonderful. But because we have attachment, we exaggerate it and then think it's going to last forever. That's the suffering of it. That's exaggerated. It's not reality. So these neuroses are not in touch with reality. And they cause us pain because of that. Hard to see. It demands a lot of inner looking, you know, to unpack and unravel. And then the virtuous states of mind, they are in their character valid because they are sent. And when the virtuous states of mind are there, love, compassion, empathy, there's a sense of connectedness with others. When anger and jealousy and pride and resentment are there, there's no sense of connectedness. You're isolated in this lonely little place. Poor me. It's unbearable pain. We can see it, you know. So the virtues have such power. They're our saving grace. To practicing, we're not set in stone, you know. That's why we have self-hate. The level of our self-hate in our culture is unbearable. We paint this terrible picture of ourselves. 27 people can say you're a nice person. You're hungry like a vampire to hear it, but you don't believe a word. One person dares to say one negative word and you eat it up as if it's the absolute truth. Because why? Because you believe it yourself. This is the irony of ego. My mother used to say to me as a child, Bobsy, darling, and call me Bobsy. You're your own worst enemy. And it's sort of true. You can see how we torture ourselves, you know. So first, develop the wisdom wing. Know your own mind. Understand yourself. Harness your energy. Work on your behavior. Become a marvelous human being. Buddha's got this phenomenal view about our potential, which is very encouraging to hear, you know, that our mind is not set in stone. We have this incredible potential to be less neurotic and more compassionate and more wise. It's not just you're stuck in a certain little groove. We have limitless potential and it's up to us to grow it, you know. And then on the basis of this, we can see it in others and help them. And never give up. That's the plan, people. So just contemplate how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could abide in equanimity, free of attachment, anger, and ignorance. May they abide so. And in the courage of the Bodhisattva, I will make this happen. Please bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could be free of suffering and its causes. May they be free. I will make this happen. Please bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could have happiness and its causes, especially the happiness of enlightenment. May they have them. I will make this happen. Please bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it will be if all sentient beings were never parted from higher rebirths and liberations, excellent bliss. May they never be parted. I will make this happen. Please bless me to be able to do this. Changchub semchog rinpoche, ma kye panam ke gyuchig, kye panyampa me payang, gong ne gong du habashok. Okay, people. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. Okay. Key to success. Never give up. Thank you, sweethearts. Thank you, people. Much love. Thank you, people, for all your lovely questions. Susan, Beth, all you people. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Bye.